This is my life, call it Chronicles, but you only see half. Monocle. I'd have to take a little break if the chronic calls, and I'm the best of both worlds, Sonic and Knuckles.
What's up, my wizards? It's Dev from SBMTG down there on the YouTube.com. We like magic, you know by now. And I'm coming to you smack dab in the middle of Pro Tour Aether Revolt weekend with a decidedly not Pro Tour deck. This is $10 Ravenous Revolution. Even though this deck is only $10, there's a lot to talk about with it. A lot of little synergies and stuff, so I hope you don't mind if I jump right in. So on that note, graphic. We're going to play 4 copies of Pia's Revolution and 4 copies of Ravenous Intruder here. This is the centerpiece combo in the deck, and the interaction is pretty easy to understand. You know, whenever Ravenous Intruder sends an artifact to the graveyard, then your opponent gets a choice. They can either let that artifact come back to your hand, or they can take a bolt to the face. It's up to them. A quick sort of FAQ, a primer on Pia's Revolution, because there's a bunch of questions that people have about it. First of all, quick one, can I elect, if my opponent wants to take the 3 damage, can I redirect that to a Planeswalker they control? Yes, matter of fact you can. But the big one is, what if I have multiple Pia's Revolutions out? What happens at that point? Well, at that point, they will, the triggers will stack. You know, your opponent will effectively have to pay 6 life to get out of, returning that artifact to your hand. But, quick addendum to that, if on that first trigger they elect to put the artifact back in your hand, then the second trigger won't have a legal target, and it won't do anything. But even just one revolution can be daunting for them. If they start taking 9, 12 damage off of one revolution over a game, then they will often elect to just start letting you have the artifact back, like almost every time. The obvious idea here is to either let them die to their own stupidity, or just let Ravenous Intruder get huge and swing in. He will often be chump blocked, yes, but we got a couple of ways to get him through, either with trample or just completely unblocked in this deck. For a little bit of redundancy, we're going to play 2 copies of Scrap Trawler in the deck. I don't think we have to play all the copies of Scrap Trawler. It doesn't seem quite as good as Pia's Revolution, but it kind of works really well with Pia's Revolution. You know, whenever an artifact goes to the graveyard, not only will they face the choice of having you get that artifact back or taking 3 damage, but you'll also be able to return an artifact with less converted mana cost to your hand. That's a lot of value. Scrap Trawler also allows you to get artifacts back into your hand from the graveyard that your opponent has previously put into the graveyard by taking 3 damage. You know, they faced the choice a couple of times, they put the things into your graveyard and taken the damage, but hey, you can just get them back anyway with the Scrap Trawler once you put something else in the graveyard. I'm also going to play 4 copies of Reckless Fireweaver in the deck because it puts our opponent into a sort of damned if they do, damned if they don't kind of situation. You know, if you've got a Fireweaver out, then once they face that decision with a Pia's Revolution, they know that even if they do not take the 3 damage and put the artifact back into your hand, they'll be taking at least the 1 damage off the Fireweaver when you play that artifact again. So it really puts another wrinkle into their decision-making process. We're also playing like 23 artifacts in the deck, so Reckless Fireweaver can just deal like 3 or 4 points damage over the course of the game just normally, even without a bunch of other tricks in play. Fireweaver sort of works as like a reverse Zulaport Cutthroat in a weird alternate dimension kind of way for us in this deck. You know, instead of Zulaport draining whenever we sacrifice an artifact or something like that, then in this case, whenever we get the artifact back and put it back into play, then we'll get a damage off of it. So it sort of feels aristocracy in that kind of way. Let's talk artifacts. We're going to play 4 copies of Ornithopter to start things off, because I want to play a 0-cost artifact, and I'd rather it be a creature than the other things. So the other 2 equipments, you know. But with Ornithopter, again, it's free, so that means that unless our opponent decides to take 3 to the face at some point, then we can just indefinitely cycle this with Revolution and Intruder in play. Usually this just translates again to our opponent taking 3 damage like the first time we try to cycle it, but that's okay, because at that point Ornithopter is a creature that can block when it's on the board, and when it dies, it's a bolt to the face. That's really good value. Also, if we have a Scrap Trawler in play and like one of our 1-mana artifacts goes to the graveyard, it allows us to put Ornithopter into our hand. So just for that synergy with Scrap Trawler, I think it's worth playing a 0-cost artifact. I think Ornithopter is the best one we can play. 1-cost artifacts now. We're going to talk about 4 copies of Implement of Combustion, and you play all 4 every day. The fact that this will draw a card when it hits the graveyard is just crazy, you know? If you have a Foundry Inspector out, then you can sort of cycle this over and over unless our opponent wants to take the 3 damage again. But we'll just be drawing cards if they don't. if they can't take the 3 damage or they'll die, we can just basically like draw our deck at that point. So that's really, really cool. And just the incidental card draw off of sacrificing it once is always good. We need 1-cost artifacts. I think this is probably the best one we can play, especially considering we're mono red anyway. Implement is special in this deck because it can stop the Saheeli Rai combo in much the same way that something like Shock can, you know. The first time, it doesn't matter how many loyalty counters are on their Saheeli when they start the combo. First time they blink it, it'll come back in with 3 loyalty counters. At that point, they will -2 her and start and use her second ability, you know. You can respond to them -2ing her by sacrificing Implement of Combustion, targeting them, redirecting the damage to the Saheeli, and that'll put her at zero loyalty, and kill her. Totally works. If anything, your opponent will know that you have that option available to you and they will just not do the combo. So as long as you've got the mana open that's necessary to sacrifice it and the implement out, then they kind of are locked out of doing that. So that's important. But I want at least 3 more copies of a 1-cost artifact in the deck just so that we can curve the way that we really want to. And for that, I've chosen 3 copies of Bomat Courier. Although I will say there are different things you could play in this slot. You could play Renegade Map, that seems okay. Terrarian also seems okay. Extra card draw's cool, only costs the 1. You could also just play another implement and like not care that you won't be able to activate it. You know, you won't have the mana for it, but who cares? You'll sacrifice it to Ravenous Intruder, you'll draw the card anyway, and it'll come back to your hand a lot of the time. So you could just always play a different implement other than Combustion, and that would work too. But I've gone with Bomat Courier here because, much like Implement of Combustion, it's something that we can sacrifice without having to have a Gremlin out, you know, a Ravenous Intruder. If we have a Pia's Revolution, we can always sacrifice either the Implement or the Bomat Courier and get the option of bringing it back to our hand unless our opponent, again, wants to take 3 damage. I just think it's important to have something you can sacrifice that doesn't require Intruder to be out to be sacrificed, you know. But all the cards I just talked about, another Implement, Renegade Map, Terrarium, they can all be sacrificed too. So that's not the only reason I played it, you know. That extra little bit of card advantage when we sometimes need it is always good. Definitely yes, and the fact that it gets a little bit of chip damage in for us, you know. Sometimes this will do 2-3 damage over the course of a game, and that can really make the difference occasionally. Seriously, the earlier you start pressuring their life total, even the slightest bit, the earlier they're going to start opting out of taking that 3 damage from the Revolution, you know. If you can put them at 17, 16, something like that, then they're only going to be able to let you know, to take the 3 damage from Revolution a couple of times before they start getting really uncomfortable with that. Finally, there's also this cool interaction with the Gremlin that you can, like, sack it to the Gremlin, get it back, play it again that same turn, and attack with it the same turn you sacrificed it to the Gremlin. That's just cool. I'm going to play 4 whole copies of Servo Schematic in the deck, and I'm going to jump on the train here. Nearly every, like, deck builder and YouTuber that I've seen play with this card has been like, man, this card is a lot of value. Yeah, turns out it actually is, you know. You'll play it, and you'll get a Servo, you know, and then when you sacrifice it to Ravenous Intruder, you'll get a Servo. That's cool. You can either just, you know, use that to get 2 extra creatures on the battlefield and go wide, or you'll have 2 more artifacts to sacrifice to Intruders. So this can be like a total of +6/+6 for only 2 mana. That's awesome. That's good regardless of whether you have Scrap Trawler or Pia's Revolution out, you know. But if you have either of those pieces, the card only gets way better. I'm going to play 3 copies of Foundry Inspector in the deck to bring down the cost of these artifacts so that we can afford to keep getting stuff back into our hand and replaying it, you know. Obviously, with our 1-cost artifacts, this just makes them free, and we can loop them if our opponent lets us, so that's cool. And also, even with stuff like Servo Schematic, just making it cost 1 is awesome. It makes other Foundry Inspectors cost 2, it makes Scrap Trawler cost 2, just all-around good card that's necessary for some elements of this combo, but is still solid even as like a 3/2 body. It's fine. I mentioned earlier that Ravenous Intruder will just get chump blocked a lot of the time, you know, and we got to prevent that from happening, so I'm going to play some ways to get him through, and that's going to be 3 Key to the City and 2 Rush of Adrenaline. Now, Key to the City is an obvious sort of no-brainer inclusion, and you could definitely play 4 in the deck if you wanted to, but I wanted to split some room in here and play Rush of Adrenaline because it's instant speed, it comes out of nowhere, and it only costs the 1 mana. Key to the City requires a little bit more setup than that, although it can draw you cards, and it just makes the creature go completely unblocked, which is sometimes better than Trample, obviously. And some people might want to play Invigorated Rampage over Rush of Adrenaline, but I'll take that 1 mana discount every day of the week. Sometimes, like, honestly, if it was just like a 1 mana card, like if Rush of Adrenaline didn't exist and there was a 1 mana card that said target creature gains trample until end of turn, I might still take that over Invigorated Rampage. Bottom line is, especially if we don't have like a Foundry Inspector out or something, we kind of want to spend as little mana as possible. And sometimes that 1 mana difference can really mean a lot. But last card in the main deck, and this one's kind of a surprise, but this card is awesome. I'm just going to play one copy of Indomitable Creativity in this deck. Well, I'm only going to play one copy because the situations where this is truly good are not going to occur all the time, and I don't want to draw this thing all the time. But if we have a Pia's Revolution out, then like 4 or 5 different artifacts or something, a few different mana, you know. Let's say we have 6 mana and a few different artifacts plus Pia's Revolution. Well, we can basically destroy our own artifacts and give our opponent the choice of either taking a buttload of damage or letting us get those cards back and putting a bunch of artifacts from our library onto the battlefield at the same time. That is incredible value. And BT dubs, you can also kill your opponent's creatures with the Indomitable Creativity. That's just like, there's so many flexible ways to play this card, and I'm actually, because of this deck and messing around with creativity, I have been brewing a couple of other things with creativity that I'm really excited about. But just this card is really, really neat. Like, I didn't realize how versatile this thing would actually be, you know? Just being able to take out your opponent's creatures if need be, or take out your own dudes, get them back to your hand, and get more guys is just insane. Like, it feels, in some limited ways, sort of like playing a Rally the Ancestors in the last format, you know? It's just like that kind of value. Not to mention that, like, if you have a Reckless Fireweaver or 2 out and you get, like, 3 or 4 more artifacts on the battlefield, then you're doing a bunch of damage. You can sometimes just kill them off of Fireweaver damage from an Indomitable Creativity. But seriously, just the one of, because it's basically a fun of. It's what we're doing. The card is just really, really fun, and I wouldn't devote a bunch of slots to it, but when it does work out and the stars align, it is hilarious. The card is great. 22 lands in the deck. We're just going to play 22 mountains and leave it at that. I don't want to go any crazier here. I mean, I guess you could, but I don't see any reason to. Keep it low, keep it budget. 22 mountains is fine. Here's our sideboard right here. We're going to definitely play 4 Shock and 4 Lightning Axe. Both of these can break out the combo, so Healy combo at instant speed. And Lightning Axe is even pretty good against all these big green-black mid-range decks that are in the format right now. So Lightning Axe actually isn't too bad. We're going to play 2 Hope of Girapur, which could be in the main deck, actually. Keep them from countering, keep them from removing creatures. That's can be pretty important. So I do like Hope of Girapur, and I wish I could find room for it in the main deck. Maybe take out a Servo Schematic and one other thing. But the deck list seems really tight to me, so I'm just not sure. And then Release the Gremlins I'm going to play a 2 of. For various reasons in this deck, actually. There's more reasons to play it other than it kills artifacts. But first and foremost, it kills artifacts. But in this deck, there's a cute interaction where if we have a Pia's Revolution out, we can actually kill our own artifacts and then make our opponent choose, obviously, between taking damage, putting those artifacts back in our hand, and we get some gremlins out of it too. So that's really cute. Here are your power rankings right here. Final score of 53, which is a fairly low score, but we're just looking to do one thing. We're very single-minded in this deck, and the synergies a 10. You know, there's a lot of tiny synergies in the deck, plus some overarching synergies that really make it deserve that 10. But the rest of the categories definitely suffer for our one-track mindedness. Plus, the deck is $10. I think the main deck is about $10 on TCG Player, and the sideboard's like $2.50. So you're getting out of there with the sideboard for less than $15. It's a pretty good deal just to sit around and goldfish by yourself or play it with your friends. You know, depending on your F&M, you can take this up here and up there and like impress a couple of people. The deck is really fun when it gets rocking and rolling, especially when it has a little bit of breathing room. You know, there's some decks in this format that can just combo off turn 4 and kill it, you know, but this deck does have a couple of god draws that can get in that gremlin really, really fast, actually. Usually, I don't like cards like Pia's Revolution that give our opponent the agency. They give our opponent the ability to choose their own fate. Usually, I don't like that. But as far as Revolution goes, there comes a point where even if the player we're playing is very good at making these types of decisions, they either can't take the 3 damage because they will die. They can just die to Revolution. Or they're just really not comfortable taking the 3. You know, once they get down to anywhere between like 7 and 9 life, they're not going to want to take that 3 damage. Like, nobody wants to die to Revolution. Now, while the base combo here is a 2-card combo, you know, it's just Gremlin and Pia's Revolution, there are some things we want to add on to the combo. So anytime we're talking about like, oh, we want Reckless Fireweaver and Scrap Trawler, and maybe we'll get an Indomitable Creativity. Like, when we're talking about 4 and 5 card combos, we're getting into Christmas land, but despite how, like, against the odds that is to happen, if you have enough time to develop your board, then it's sort of an inevitability at that point. So if the deck is given the chance to go a little bit later on into the game and get into the 5th, 6th, 7th turn, then it's going to start, like, really doing super powerful stuff and making your opponent sweat. Because, again, at some point, they're just not going to be able to take the 3 damage. By the way, there's also the point that some players will allow themselves to get down to 3 or 6 or 1 life sometimes. And, you know, then they'll stop with Pia's Revolution. Well, at that point, like, if they're down at 1, you don't even have to sacrifice an artifact to Gremlin and get it through, you know. But there are times where you only have to sacrifice an artifact or 2, and you don't even have to have that much synergy going to get Ravenous Intruder through for the wind. And don't forget, we're playing Key to the City and a way to give the thing trample, so it's not that hard to get it through for like 5, 6 damage when we need to. But again, 2, 3, and 4 card combos are hard, especially when they're susceptible to removal, and especially in the format where everyone is trying to play instant speed removal to disrupt a creature-based combo. So we got that going against us too. But again, just incredibly fun deck when it gets rocking and rolling. And just, you know, it's $10. For $10, you really couldn't ask for much more synergy packed into 60 cards. But for now, I'm tapped out. That's all I've got for this one. Let me know how you felt about it down there in the sideboard, because there are multiple ways that people are building this deck. I've seen a mono red version. I've seen the Aristocrats black version that adds black for Zulaport Cutthroat, Yahini, and a couple of other things. So there's a few different ways to build this combo deck. I just want to know how you felt about my build. So let me know down there in the comments section how you felt about it and how you'd change it if given the chance. And what are we doing next time? Well, the next time I see you, I will very likely be covering Pro Tour Aether Revolt. I'm going to tell you what the top 8 decks were at that tournament, how they worked, how the rest of the field fared, all of that. Get ready for that video just a couple of days from now. I'm excited to see how this one turns out. And with that, I'll see you guys later. Hope you enjoyed this, and if you did, smash the like button. It helps me out a lot. You can also share the video if you feel like sharing. That actually kind of helps me more than like anything. Sharing is awesome. You can also sub if you're new, or if you just haven't subbed yet, hit the bell to make sure you get the notifications. I'll see you cats later. I'm Deb from SBMTG. Thanks for watching, my wizards. Eventually, it's sort of inevitability. It's sort of inevitability. I'm going to put this at the end of the video. It's sort of an inevitability at that point. So, I don't even remember like what I was talking about.